When my daughter married a man who was clearly more interested in our family's assets than in her, I knew I had to prepare something solid to protect her future. I never told her what was really stored inside that old unit downtown. My son in law, Lucas, always looked at it with open disdain. "Dad, why don't you just get rid of that junk already?" he'd say. He had no idea that the rusted storage unit would be the very thing that would eventually stop him. I endured his behavior for 3 long years, waiting patiently for the moment his plan would fail and the truth would finally surface. Before we unlock what's hidden inside that unit, take a moment to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing to join our community. We'd also love to know where you're watching from today. Please keep in mind that while this story is inspired by real-life lessons, some names and details have been changed for storytelling purposes. Stay with us. The lesson ahead is one you won't want to miss. 1 year after everything collapsed, I'm telling this story looking back on that time. My name is Vincent Ashford. I'm 64 years old and I live in Los Angeles. It's a city where the sun shines most days, palm trees line the streets, and people constantly reinvent themselves. That's something I learned the hard way. I spent my life here raising my daughter after my wife, Carol, passed away 12 years ago. I thought I was ready for whatever life might bring. I was wrong. My daughter, Sophia, is 31 now. She's intelligent, kind, and generous to a fault. The type who always looks for the good in people even when she shouldn't. 3 years ago, she married a man named Lucas Torrance. I remember the wedding clearly. On the surface, everything looked perfect. The venue was beautiful. The flowers smelled incredible. Everyone smiled for the photos. I watched Sophia walk down the aisle and felt a tight knot in my stomach. It wasn't happiness, it was something else entirely. I said nothing that day. I smiled, hugged them both, and gave a toast that made people laugh. But I had already noticed something in Lucas's eyes. The way he looked at Sophia wasn't loving. It was possessive, as if she were something he owned. At that time, I was already keeping a secret. For 12 years after Carol's death, I had been renting a storage unit downtown. Not because I lacked space at home, and not because I was careless with my belongings. I rented it because I needed a secure place, almost a fortress, to store what mattered most. Carol's documents, her jewelry, insurance policies, the will, the trust paperwork that protected Sophia's future, everything that reflected the truth about our family's finances. Most people assumed it was just a unit full of junk. Whenever it came up, I'd get that look, the one that silently asks why anyone would keep old clutter. I let them believe that. It was easier. The reality was that Carol and I had spent years building protection for our daughter. Before she passed, we created a prenuptial agreement, a family trust, and a life insurance policy that would pay directly into that trust. We made sure Sophia would never be left exposed, Gashfra, no matter what happened. I never told Sophia about any of it. That was the real secret. When she married Lucas, I made sure she had no access to the unit. I kept the key myself, hidden away. I couldn't fully explain why at the time. I just felt it. Something about Lucas didn't sit right with me. For the first 2 years of their marriage, I observed quietly. I met Sophia for dinner when I could. I called her often. I noticed details. Lucas always steered conversations toward money. He questioned her about what I might leave behind. He subtly discouraged her from spending time with me. I began writing things down, small observations in a leather journal I kept in my desk drawer. Then Jacob called. Jacob Winters has been my closest friend for 33 years. He's not the type to exaggerate or overreact. So when he called me one afternoon, 3 years into Sophia's marriage, and told me he'd overheard Lucas discussing me, talking about the value of my insurance, about how it would all go to Sophia, and how things would be better if I simply weren't around anymore, I believed him. Jacob wouldn't lie about something like that. He wasn't trying to cause drama. He was genuinely afraid. That was when everything became clear. All the silence, all the documents, all the preparation, it had all been for this moment. I didn't realize it then, but my life had been leading to that conversation. I ended the call and sat alone in my living room for a long time. I thought about Carol. I remembered how strongly she had insisted on the prenup, the trust, the paperwork. I remembered the letters she left behind, notes I found after she died that hinted she knew something I didn't. She wrote things like, Protect Sophia with documents, not words. Protect her from people who use love as leverage. I didn't understand those letters until that day. Suddenly, everything made sense. I had been preparing for this moment my entire life. Every decision, every precaution, every secret had led here. I opened the leather journal and read 3 years of notes. That was when I knew it was time to stop observing and start acting. It was time to open the storage unit. It was time to show Sophia what I had been protecting her from. What I didn't know then was how far Lucas was willing to go, or how much truth my daughter would be forced to face just to survive him. After Jacob's warning, my thoughts drifted back to the beginning, to the night everything truly started. It was the Sunday dinner when Sophia first brought Lucas home. I was standing at the stove when they walked in, and I knew almost immediately. It took about 15 seconds to realize this man was different from anyone she dated before, and not in a good way. Sophia looked happy, glowing in that way people do when they think they've found something real. She introduced Lucas proudly, her hand naturally finding his. They looked like they fit together, at least on the surface. But the way Lucas looked at her made my skin crawl. He was handsome, tall, dark-haired, well-dressed, the kind of man who knew how to smile at the right time and laugh on cue. He praised the dinner before even tasting it. He asked about my work, my years in Los Angeles, the house, all the right questions. But beneath it all, I sensed calculation. When we sat down, he turned to me casually and said, "This is a beautiful home, Vincent. How long have you owned it?" It wasn't a random question. I'd learned to read people over 64 years. I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. He wasn't curious. He was assessing. 40 years, I answered, cutting into my salmon. Carol and I bought it together. He nodded, storing that detail away. Must be worth a lot now. LA real estate always goes up. Sophia laughed nervously and tried to change the subject, but I had already seen enough. The way Lucas looked at her when she said his name told me everything. It wasn't love. It was control. Carol used to warn me about people like that. She'd say, love doesn't calculate or keep score. Sitting there at my own table, watching Lucas ask Sophia to pass the butter while studying me, I remembered her words clearly. He asked about my career, my investments, whether I still worked, whether I traveled, and eventually about life insurance. He framed it casually, but the timing felt intentional. Sophia squeezed his hand, completely unaware. To her, this was just a man trying to know her father. She didn't see that each question was a line he was drawing on a map he intended to claim. After dinner, Lucas helped clear the table. Alone in the kitchen, his attention shifted fully to me. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "Sophia's lucky to have this security." That was the moment I knew. Not that he was lucky to have her, but that she was lucky to inherit what I'd built. Later, after they left, I sat in my study with a glass of whiskey, staring at Carol's photograph from our honeymoon. She would have seen what I saw. She would have recognized the danger immediately. That night, I decided I wouldn't say anything to Sophia yet. She wouldn't have believed me. Not then. Not after just one dinner. Not when she was already developing feelings for him. If I spoke too early, I would only push her closer to him. I had seen it happen countless times. A father warns his daughter about a man, and suddenly she becomes determined to prove everyone wrong. So I chose to observe, to listen, and to wait. I pulled a leather journal from my desk drawer, one Carol had given me years earlier, when she insisted we organize our finances and plan for the future. I opened it to a blank page and wrote the date, Sunday, first meeting with Lucas Torrance. Then I recorded everything I noticed, the questions he asked, the way he looked at Sophia, the calculation behind his gaze, the remark about security, all of it. I told myself I was simply being careful, just a protective father. But deep down, I think I already knew. Some part of me understood this wasn't just a boyfriend. It was a threat. And I was starting a record that 3 years later would become the only barrier between my daughter and something far worse. I should have said something that night. I should have pulled Sophia aside and told her what I saw in Lucas's eyes. But I didn't yet know how far he would go. I only knew I needed to watch, listen, and wait for the moment when action would be unavoidable. The real warning came 6 months into their marriage. It was subtle, so subtle that Sophia didn't even recognize it. But I did. It began with a question Lucas asked her one evening. Sophia called me later, her voice different, confused, and hurt. She asked if we could talk, and I knew immediately something had changed. Dad, Lucas thinks I should know more about the family finances, she said carefully. He thinks it's strange that I don't know anything about your money. He says you're keeping things from me. Something cold settled in my chest. This was Lucas's move, deliberate and calculated. I kept my voice calm. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him I never really thought about it, she said. But now I'm wondering. Why haven't you told me about your finances, Dad? It does seem a little odd. Of course it did. Lucas had made her question me without accusing me directly. He planted doubt about her own father, but that wasn't the worst of it. A week later, Sophia called again, this time clearly upset. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest, she said. I told her I was listening. She continued, Lucas says Jacob has always had feelings for me. He says Jacob told him our marriage is a mistake, that he wants to break us up because he's still in love with me. I went completely still. Jacob, my closest friend for over 30 years, someone who had been part of our family for decades. Lucas was lying about him, and Sophia was starting to believe it. Sophia, that isn't true, I said. Jacob would never say that. She hesitated. How do you know, Dad? How do you really know what Jacob says when you're not around? The question hit hard. She was doubting Jacob now. Lucas had taken one of the most important relationships in her life and poisoned it with a lie. And Sophia, being kind and trusting, was beginning to accept it. Lucas has no reason to lie to me, she said, defensiveness creeping in. He barely knows Jacob. Why would he make that up? Because Lucas was isolating her. He was cutting her off from anyone who might protect her, anyone who might see through him, anyone who might warn her. And he was doing it carefully, so carefully that Sophia couldn't see it happening. Over the following weeks, I watched her pull away from Jacob. She returned his calls less often. She made excuses when he invited us to dinner. And worst of all, I saw doubt in her eyes when she looked at him, doubt Lucas had deliberately placed there. That was when I fully understood what I was dealing with. Lucas wasn't just a gold digger looking for an easy gain. He was far more dangerous. He was methodical, strategic. He understood psychology in ways most people don't. He knew how to manipulate Sophia, not through force or open aggression, but through doubt and carefully constructed lies. One night, I sat in my study and opened the journal I had started after that first Sunday dinner. I reread my early notes about his questions, his calculating stare, his comment about security. Those observations once felt concerning. Now they felt minor compared to what I was seeing unfold. I wrote everything down. Lucas questioning my finances through Sophia, the lie about Jacob, the growing distance between her and my friend, the isolation happening in real time. As I wrote, something became clear. This wasn't just about money, though money mattered. This was about control. Lucas wanted complete control over Sophia, her thoughts, her relationships, her sense of reality. He wanted to make sure that when the time came for someone to tell her the truth, no one would be left. Her father would seem secretive. Her closest friend would seem untrustworthy. Lucas would be the only voice she believed. It was a precise form of psychological manipulation, and it was happening to my daughter right in front of me. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Lucas. I wasn't going to argue with Sophia or try to convince her he was lying. I knew enough about manipulation to understand that would only push her closer to him. Instead, I would document everything, every lie, every manipulation, every calculated move. I would build a record that one day would show Sophia the truth clearly. I began writing in that journal every night. I noted conversations Sophia mentioned. I recorded my own observations. I tracked timelines, what Lucas said, how Sophia reacted. It was slow, deliberate work, requiring patience and focus. At the time, I didn't know exactly what I would do with it. I didn't have a clear plan. I just knew that one day my daughter would need the truth laid out plainly, and I wanted to be ready. I had no idea then that Lucas's isolation tactics were only the beginning. I didn't know the next 3 years would involve far more than manipulation and lies. I didn't yet understand what he was capable of. But that night, I made a choice. I would watch. I would document. And when the time came and I sensed it would, I would be ready to protect my daughter, whatever the cost. The next morning, I drove to the storage unit and pulled out an old leather journal that had been sitting there for 12 years, untouched. I had bought it long ago, thinking I might write about my life with Carol. I never did. Now I opened it to the first blank page. The leather was soft and worn. I uncapped a pen and stared at the empty page. For a moment, I just sat there in that climate controlled unit, surrounded by boxes of my life, wondering how to begin. I dated the entry May 15th, 2021. Then I wrote, Sophia seemed distant today. Lucas must have said something to her. That was how it began. One sentence, one observation. Even then, I knew this journal would matter. I committed to it. Every week, I returned to the storage unit to write what I had seen, heard, and noticed. By June, the entries grew more detailed. June 3rd, I watched Lucas touch Sophia's arm when she laughed too freely at something I said. She was happy. He didn't like it. The touch wasn't affection. It was a signal, a quiet reminder that he was watching, controlling even her joy. July 12th, Lucas checked Sophia's phone while she was in the bathroom. He did it casually, like it was his right. When she returned, he smiled as if nothing happened. She had no idea. August 8th, Lucas told Sophia, Your father doesn't understand us. He's too old to see what we have. I watched her nod. I watched her accept the idea that I was the problem and that he was the only one who truly cared. By September, a pattern was clear. This wasn't random jealousy or insecurity. It was deliberate and consistent. September 20th, Lucas insisted Sophia's yoga class was a waste of money. She didn't argue. She accepted it. I began to see the larger picture. This wasn't only about money or time. It was about erasing her sense of self. Every refusal, every decision made for her, every correction, it all followed the same design. October 5th, I overheard Lucas on the phone talking about Sophia's future, about inheritance, about how much better life would be when her old man was gone. Those were his exact words. I felt cold all over. October turned into November, and the pattern became undeniable. Page after page filled with dates, details, and moments. Lucas controlled what Sophia wore, who she saw, how much money she accessed, her schedule, her phone, her relationships. More than that, he controlled the story she believed. He told her I kept secrets. He told her Jacob wanted to destroy their marriage. He told her she was lucky to have him, that no one else would love her the same way. November 15th, 3 clear patterns established. First, isolation. Lucas had cut Sophia off from those who might protect her. Second, financial control. He monitored every dollar. Third, psychological manipulation. He reshaped how she viewed the people who loved her. November 28th, a fourth pattern emerged, and it frightened me most. Lucas was asking more about my life, my work, my insurance, my assets. This was no longer just about my daughter. By December, I had filled nearly 200 pages. 200 pages documenting the precise, calculated way Lucas dismantled Sophia's independence and replaced it with dependence. On December 15th, 2021, I sat in the storage unit and reread an entire year of entries. The pattern was clear and undeniable. Lucas wasn't a slightly controlling boyfriend or a jealous husband. He was far more deliberate. He was a predator, following a playbook likely used before and likely to be used again. Isolation came first, then financial control, then psychological manipulation, and now targeting. The questions about my money, the comments about how much better things would be when I was gone. I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't know what Lucas was capable of. But sitting there, surrounded by evidence, I understood one thing with certainty. I was watching a pattern unfold in real time. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew I had to be ready. Patterns like this don't stop. They escalate. They grow darker and more dangerous over time. And I had a strong feeling the worst was still ahead. 3 years. That's how long I observed. 3 full years of family dinners where Lucas smiled and acted like the ideal son-in-law. 3 years of filling that leather journal with notes about his behavior. 3 years of staying silent because I didn't yet have enough evidence for anyone to believe me. It wasn't easy. Those years were an exercise in patience and control. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every time Sophia mentioned something Lucas had said or done, I had to hold my tongue. I had to smile and pretend everything was normal while quietly recording the gradual dismantling of my daughter's life in a journal locked away in that storage unit. As time passed, Lucas grew more confident. The isolation worsened. By the second year, Sophia had almost no friends left. Lucas had deliberately poisoned each relationship with lies. He told her college friends were jealous of her marriage. He claimed her coworkers were trying to manipulate her. He convinced her that everyone wanted them to fail, and Sophia believed him. His control over money also intensified. By the third year, Lucas had taken full control of her paychecks. She couldn't buy a coffee without him knowing. When she questioned it, he said it was because they were building a future together and that transparency meant trust. It sounded reassuring when he said it, but it was control, nothing more. I watched Sophia shrink. The brightness in her eyes faded. She laughed less. She questioned herself more during visits, which became increasingly rare. She looked like a shadow of the daughter I had raised. Then, in the second year, the bruises appeared. The first was on her arm. She said she'd fallen. The next was on her hip, blamed on a car door. Then there was one on her thigh, supposedly from bumping into the bed frame. Each bruise came with an explanation, and each explanation was less believable than the last. But Sophia delivered them smoothly, as if they had been practiced. Later, the bruises appeared on her face. A door, an accident at home, stories that didn't hold up. Yet Sophia repeated them with certainty, as though she had been taught to believe them. Every time I saw a new bruise, everything in me wanted to act. I wanted to pull her away from him. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to stop what was happening to my daughter, but I couldn't. Not without proof that others would accept. I had seen this before. The more a father intervenes, the more a daughter defends her abuser. The more you try to rescue them, the tighter they cling to the person hurting them. So I did the only thing I could. I documented everything. Dates, details, observations, page after page, year after year. I was building a record I hoped I would never have to use. Jacob remained present throughout those 3 years. He called me often, checking in, sharing his concerns about Sophia. He noticed things too. The isolation, the fear in her eyes, the way Lucas always kept a hand on her, always maintaining contact, always reminding her he was there. "Something's wrong, Vincent," Jacob told me more than once. "I can feel it. This isn't normal." I knew he was right, but without evidence, what could we say that wouldn't make things worse? By the third year, the journal had nearly 800 pages. 800 pages of observations, fears, and documentation of Lucas's escalating abuse. I had dates, times, direct quotes, and a clear timeline showing the progression from psychological manipulation to physical violence. Still, I couldn't move. Not yet. The hardest part was watching Sophia defend him. That's what happens in abuse. Victims protect their abusers. They excuse their behavior. They blame themselves. I tried to reach her when I could. "Sophia, how are you really doing?" I'd ask during our rare calls. "I'm fine, Dad. Everything's great. Lucas just wants what's best for us. He's very protective." Protective. That's what she called the cage he built around her. 3 years of watching, 3 years of waiting, 3 years of knowing something had to change, without knowing how to make it happen without destroying everything. Then one afternoon, Jacob called. His voice was different, serious, urgent in a way I'd never heard before. "Vincent, we need to talk," he said. "I need to see you today. I saw something, and you need to know." My heart sank. I had been waiting 3 years for something to shift. I had been preparing for the moment I'd need to act, but I hadn't expected it to come from Jacob. "What did you see?" I asked. "Not over the phone," he said. "We need to meet. And Vincent, I think it's worse than we thought." Those words changed everything. Jacob had finally seen what I had been documenting all along. Someone else had witnessed something undeniable. I realized then that all my patience, all my records, had led to this moment. We met at a small cafe near my house. Jacob looked worried in a way I recognized immediately. It was the same expression I'd carried for 3 years. He was already seated, a cup of coffee in front of him that he hadn't touched. His hands were clenched together. When he saw me, he stood and we hugged, the kind of embrace shared by people who no longer pretend. "Thank you for coming," he said as we sat down. "Of course," I replied. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath and stared at his coffee before speaking. "I've been trying to help Sophia," he said quietly. "For months. I've tried to let her know I'm here, but she keeps pushing me away. Now I understand why." I asked him what he meant, even though I already knew. Lucas has been telling her things about me, Jacob said. He's convinced her I have ulterior motives, that I've always had feelings for her, that I'm trying to break them up. She believes him. She thinks I'm the problem. I nodded. This was exactly what I had written in my journal, but hearing it directly from Jacob made it real in a different way. That's not all, he continued. I've been paying closer attention. Sophia looks diminished, smaller, and the way Lucas watches her controls every interaction. It isn't love. I know, I said quietly. Jacob looked at me closely. You know? I didn't answer right away. I studied him, my friend of 33 years, who had never stopped caring about Sophia even when she pushed him away. In that moment, I decided to tell him everything. I asked him to listen without interrupting. For 20 minutes, I explained it all. The journal, the 3 years of documentation, the dates, the escalation, the bruises, the lies, the isolation, the financial control, the erosion of Sophia's identity. When I finished, Jacob was silent. His face was pale. 3 years, he said finally. You've been documenting this for 3 years. I needed proof, I told him. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, hurt evident in his voice. I told him the truth. I didn't want to pull him into something dangerous. I wasn't sure who Lucas might manipulate or threaten. I was trying to protect him. Jacob shook his head. You shouldn't have done this alone, he said. We could have handled it together. I nodded. I knew that now. After a long pause, Jacob leaned forward. What do you need from me? He asked. Your help, I said. Sophia won't believe me, but she might believe you. He didn't hesitate. I'll do whatever it takes. I told him I feared Lucas might be planning something worse. I had heard him mention my insurance, talk about how much better things would be when I was gone. Jacob's expression hardened. Then we move faster, he said. We get Sophia away from him before this gets worse. I agreed, but I stressed caution. We needed to be strategic. We needed Sophia to understand the truth before acting. Jacob nodded. Then let's do it, he said. Tell me everything. For the first time in 3 years, I felt relief. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone else knew. Someone else was ready to fight for my daughter. Jacob and I spent the next 3 hours reviewing my notes, mapping the timeline, discussing how to approach Sophia without triggering her defenses, and how to protect her if Lucas reacted badly. As the afternoon light shifted through the cafe windows, I realized everything had changed. I had spent 3 years documenting alone. Now, with Jacob beside me, I understood this was no longer my fight alone. 2 men who loved Sophia, 2 men who knew the truth. The time for observation was over. The time for action had begun. 3 weeks later, Jacob called me with words that made my blood run cold. Vincent, he said, alarm clear in his voice. I had just run into Sophia at the grocery store. Vincent, she has bruises on her arms, dark bruises, Jacob said. When I asked her about them, she said Lucas told her that if she told you anything, he'd hurt you. I went very still. For 3 years, I had documented the escalation in my journal, page after page. But this was different. This was a threat against me. Lucas had crossed a line he couldn't take back. Tell me exactly what she said, I said quietly. Jacob recounted the conversation. At first, Sophia had tried to dismiss the bruises with excuses about falling, but under gentle questioning, she had finally opened up. She admitted that Lucas had become angry over something trivial, her laughing too loudly at something on her phone. He had grabbed her arms hard enough to leave marks, and then he had said the words that terrified her the most. If you tell your father about this, he'll pay for it. One way or another, he'll regret trying to take you away from me. I'm coming to get her, I said immediately. Give me the address. Vincent, what are you going to do? Jacob asked. I'm bringing my daughter home, I replied. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my house, hands shaking. For 3 years, I had maintained a controlled anger, a focused rage channeled into my journal, into evidence, into preparation. But this was different. This was a man threatening my life while physically abusing my daughter. He had made a fatal mistake by putting his threat into words, giving Jacob a witness, giving me something concrete. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't about careful documentation anymore. This was about survival, her survival. I grabbed my keys and left, not thinking about what I'd say to Lucas or what plan I would follow. I only knew I needed to get to Sophia, to get her away from that apartment, away from him, away from someone willing to hurt her and threaten me to maintain control. As I drove toward the condo Jacob had given me, my mind raced. I thought about 3 years of documentation, about the 800 pages in my journal. I remembered every bruise, every lie, every moment of isolation Lucas had inflicted on my daughter. All that preparation, all that patience had led to this night, this drive. The city lights blurred as I navigated the streets. Sophia and Lucas lived about 30 minutes from my house in a condo near Malibu. A beautiful place, but always a cage. An oceanfront prison keeping my daughter isolated from anyone who could help her. I considered what awaited me. Would Lucas let me in? Would he try to stop me? Could there be a confrontation? I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't leave Sophia there another night. The time for waiting was over. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. Drive safe. I'm here for you. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Those words steadied me. Jacob was right. I wasn't alone. I had documentation, a witness, 3 years of evidence, and a friend willing to stand with me. Most importantly, I had clarity. Lucas had made his intentions clear. He had threatened my life to keep control over my daughter. I was going to extract her from that situation, no matter what it took. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The ocean came into view, dark under the night sky. Somewhere ahead, in that condo overlooking the water, my daughter lived in fear. I was going to bring her home. But one thought gnawed at me. How far would Lucas go to stop her from leaving? I didn't know. I didn't know if he'd fight me or try to convince her not to leave, or what desperation might drive him. I only knew I had to act. Every minute I delayed put her in greater danger. I arrived at the condo just before 9 p.m. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. 3 years of observation, 3 years of documentation, 3 years of preparation, all leading to this moment. I got out and walked toward the building, knowing one thing with certainty. Tonight, everything would change. Lucas had made a critical error. By threatening me, he gave me permission to act. I didn't know what he'd do, but I was coming for my daughter. Once inside, I saw the bruises with my own eyes. I knew it was time. Time to show Sophia the truth. Time to show Jacob the full extent of Lucas's behavior. I called Jacob immediately. Come to Sophia's apartment. Bring your keys. We're getting her out tonight. 20 minutes later, the three of us were in Sophia's living room. I had brought the journal, knowing instinctively tonight would need it. Sophia looked at it, confused. What is that, Dad? The truth, I said quietly. Everything I've documented. Everything Lucas has done to you. I opened to the first entry and began reading aloud. June 3rd, 2021. Lucas told Sophia her father doesn't understand love. He said his controlling behavior is normal. That's how people who truly care act. Sophia's face went pale. I continued reading until September 12th, 2021. She had stopped mentioning her friends. Lucas had forced her to choose between him and them, and she chose him. October 14th, 2021. I documented Lucas checking her phone while she was in the bathroom. She thanked him, calling it protection. Each entry was a brick in a wall of evidence. Each date, observation, and direct quote showing manipulation, control, and escalation. February 14th, 2023. Sophia flinched when Lucas raised his voice. March 8th, 2023. She reported that Lucas had pushed her into a wall. She called it an intense moment, believing she deserved it. As I read, I watched my daughter's realization unfold. Tears streamed down her face. Dad, she whispered. You've been documenting this the whole time, I said. 3 years. Every observation, every conversation, every bruise, every lie. Jacob stood, anger radiating. 800 pages, he said, looking at the journal. He's been doing this for 800 pages. I continued methodically. I read about financial control, isolation, how Lucas poisoned her mind against me, against Jacob, against anyone who could intervene. Specific dates, specific incidents. First, the lies about me, then the lies about Jacob, then the phone checks, then the first bruise, and the increasing frequency of physical abuse. Each entry built a clear path to this moment, where my daughter could finally see the truth. When I finished, silence filled the room. I don't understand, Sophia said softly. Why didn't you just tell me? You wouldn't have believed me, I said gently. Not without seeing the pattern. This isn't random. This isn't love. It's a calculated campaign of control. Jacob asked, What do you mean? There are 4 patterns, I said. Isolation, Lucas cut you off from anyone who might protect you. Financial control. He took over your money and paychecks. Psychological manipulation. He rewired how you think about those who love you, making you doubt me, doubt Jacob, doubt yourself. Physical violence. When the others weren't enough to keep you compliant, he escalated to hurting you. Sophia shook. Jacob put a hand on her shoulder. This isn't your fault, I told her. None of this is your fault. You didn't cause it. You didn't deserve it. This is what he chose to do. I believed him, Sophia said, voice breaking. That's what abusers do, Jacob said, voice hard with anger. They make you believe lies. They make you feel crazy for questioning them. They make you think you're the problem. I closed the journal. Hundreds of pages remained, but Sophia had seen enough. She finally understood the scope of what had been done to her. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't her fault. It was a deliberate, calculated pattern of abuse meant to break her and make her dependent on a man who didn't love her. Sophia looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. What happens now? Now, I said, we get you somewhere safe. We make a plan. We protect you. Even as I said it, I felt the shadow of something I hadn't told them yet, something still unfolding, something the journal couldn't show. It recorded what Lucas had done, but not what he was planning or the depths of his desperation. About 2 months later, Lucas made his move. He had Sophia approach me about the house, not to live in, but to own. He wanted control of the asset. I was in my study when Sophia called. Her voice sounded different, coached, rehearsed. Dad, we need a bigger place, she said carefully. We want to build a life together, and the condo isn't enough. Could you help with the house? I knew immediately what this was. I had documented every conversation where Lucas had discussed my property. I had written down the moment he realized its value. Sophia, I'm not going to give you my house, I said calmly. That's not happening. Silence. Then I heard Lucas in the background, angry, guiding her words. Why not? Sophia asked, desperation creeping in. Because your house isn't mine to give, I said, and because I know what this is really about. I hung up. 2 hours later, Lucas called me directly. A shift. He had never called before. Listen here, he said, voice cold and sharp. You're being selfish. Your daughter needs help, and you're refusing because you're a controlling old man who can't stand to see her happy. That's not what this is about, I said. Lucas's voice rose. You know what you are. You're a coward. You hide behind your money and your secrets, and you won't even help your own child. You're the reason she's unhappy. You're the reason we're struggling. I stayed silent. I had learned long ago not to engage with his manipulation. I'm taking care of your daughter, he continued. I'm the one who loves her, who's there for her, and you sit in that big house of yours judging us, keeping us poor, keeping us down. You're pathetic. Is that everything? I asked quietly. Yeah, one more thing, he said. His voice had darkened, become dangerous. You need to understand I'm not going anywhere. Sophia is mine. That house should be ours. If you don't cooperate, you're going to regret it. Then he hung up. I sat in silence in my study, letting his words settle. It became clear. Lucas had run out of subtle tactics. He was past manipulation, past careful control. Now he was using direct aggression, direct threats, direct intimidation. Desperation had replaced calculation. A desperate man is dangerous. A man losing control will take actions he wouldn't normally consider. Lucas had believed he had all the time in the world to isolate Sophia, break her down, make her dependent, and eventually manipulate her into helping him access my assets. But I had shortened that timeline by showing Sophia the journal, by helping her see the pattern, and by refusing to give in. I had accelerated everything. He was panicking. His true face was now visible, and I knew things would get worse before they improved. I called Stephen Garrett, our family lawyer, the same man who had helped Carol and me with our prenuptial agreement and trust. Stephen, it's Vincent. We need to talk about Lucas Torrance. I think he might be planning something illegal. For the next hour, I went through everything. The journal, the documentation, the escalation from psychological abuse to physical violence to direct threats, and his attempts to pressure Sophia into giving him access to my assets. You need a restraining order, Vincent, Stephen said firmly. And you need to do it now. Escalation patterns like this don't stop on their own. I know, I said. I've been watching him escalate for 3 years. Then you know what comes next. Stephen continued, desperate men do desperate things. After hanging up, I considered what was coming. A restraining order would anger Lucas further. It would back him into a corner, force a choice. He could lose control or escalate even more dangerously. I didn't know which, but I knew the time for documentation was over. The time for observation had ended. Now it was legal action, protection, preparation. Lucas had shown me his true face, a man capable of anything. That night, I contacted the lawyer Jacob and a private investigator I had used before. I began building legal walls around myself and Sophia. I started the restraining order paperwork and ensured everyone involved understood Lucas's danger. I realized finally that the house had never been about shelter, it was about control. 3 weeks after filing the order, I received a call from Morris Reed, manager at Secure Vault Storage. "Mr. Ashford," he said, voice tight with concern. "We've had an incident. Someone tried to cut the lock on your unit." My blood went cold. "Tell me what happened." "A man came in this morning around 11. He didn't have access, entered through an unsecured side door, went directly to Unit 247 with bolt cutters. When I confronted him, he got aggressive, claiming the unit belonged to his wife. He refused to leave, so I called security." "Did he give his name?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "He was tall, dark-haired, mid-30s, very angry. Security footage should have him on camera." "Lucas?" "Definitely Lucas. He left, but not before threatening me, saying he'd be back and that he knew what was in the unit." My mind raced. Lucas had found the storage unit. Somehow he tracked its location, desperate enough to attempt break-in broad daylight on camera. "Morris, no one is allowed access under any circumstances," I said. "If he comes back, call the police immediately." "Yes, sir. I'll make sure of it. Should I increase security?" "Yes, and I'm calling the police now." I reported the attempt to local law enforcement, provided a description of Lucas, and explained the situation. With the restraining order in place, this was a clear violation. Then I called Jacob. "Lucas tried to break into the storage unit." There was silence. "This morning, bolt cutters. The manager stopped him, but he's threatening to come back," I said. "Vincent, he's escalating. He's desperate," Jacob replied. "I know," I said. "Desperate men make mistakes, but he's discovered the one thing I've protected most carefully. He doesn't know what's inside, but he knows it's important. He's willing to commit a crime to access it. That tells me everything about his desperation." The storage unit was my insurance policy, the place where I had 3 years of evidence, legal documents, Carol's legacy, and protections for Sophia. Lucas didn't know the specifics, but he knew enough to act. I spent the day coordinating, calling Stephen to include the attempted break-in the legal case, instructing the investigator to increase surveillance, and checking security at the unit. The storage unit had become a flashpoint, the place where everything could come to a head. Lucas knew it mattered, and he was willing to escalate to criminal action. That night, I went to the unit myself. Everything was intact, the boxes with Carol's belongings, the journal, the legal documents. Lucas hadn't gotten inside, but he had confirmed one crucial fact. He knew it existed and mattered. Time was no longer on my side. As I drove home, I thought about the pattern I had documented for 3 years: isolation, financial control, psychological manipulation, physical violence, and now desperation. Desperation is the most dangerous stage. A desperate man acts without calculation, thinking only of survival. I had no idea what Lucas would do next. I called Jacob. "We need to meet immediately. The storage unit break-in attempt wasn't random. It's desperation. He's running out of time and options." Jacob leaned forward. "You think he's planning something bigger?" "I know it," I said. "I've spent 3 years documenting this man. We've crossed into new territory." "What do you mean?" Jacob asked. "Lucas has lost control. He tried to manipulate Sophia. She saw through it. He tried to intimidate me. I didn't back down. He tried to access the storage unit and failed. Every move has cost him ground. Men like him, whose identity is control, don't handle losing well." I walked to the window. The night was dark. When a man like that realizes he's losing everything, he doesn't negotiate. He escalates to the only option left: elimination. Jacob asked, "You think he's planning to hurt you?" "It's not a question," I said. "I know he is. He believes he can get away with it. He thinks that if I'm gone, Sophia will be vulnerable again." Jacob stood. "We need to go to the police. An attempted break-in and overheard conversations from years ago. They won't act. We prepare instead. Gather evidence. make it impossible for him to act without consequences. I called the private investigator. Full surveillance on Lucas Torrance 24/7. Track all movements, conversations, any calls about money, insurance, or me, report immediately. Over the next few days, Jacob and I developed a plan. He checked in daily. The investigator maintained constant surveillance. I varied my routines, upgraded home security, added locks, cameras, motion sensors. Sleep came poorly. Every sound made me alert. But I was calm. I had spent 3 years preparing, documenting, gathering evidence, building a case. One night in my study, I opened the leather journal. 3 years of observation, 3 years of watching a man systematically destroy my daughter's life. The end of the story was approaching. It would not be quiet, not subtle. Violence, in whatever form Lucas chose, was inevitable. I called Stephen Garrett. If anything happens to me, everything must be in order. Sophia protected, the storage unit secured, the documentation preserved and understood. Vincent, are you in danger? Stephen asked directly. Where I think so, I admitted. I knew Lucas was planning something, and I had to ensure that, even if something happened to me, the truth would come out. That night, I made all necessary arrangements. I left copies of my journal with Stephen, with Jacob, and with the private investigator. I updated my will. I made sure everything I had documented would survive me, even if I didn't, because I realized, finally, that I had been preparing for this moment my entire life. Not always consciously, but every decision, every precaution, every document had been building toward this moment where I was ready. The next morning, Jacob called. The investigator called. Lucas had been making calls. Multiple, careful, deliberate calls. What kind of calls? I asked. He's asking about your schedule, Vincent, Jacob said. Where you go, your routines. A chill ran through me, but I wasn't afraid. I was ready. This was the moment everything would come to a head, when Lucas would make his move and the plan he had executed for 3 years would either succeed or fail. I intended to make sure it failed. That night, after speaking with Jacob, I couldn't sleep. I drove alone to the storage unit, which I hadn't visited in months. I needed to remind myself of what I had built and protected. The climate-controlled unit was exactly as I had left it, organized in a way only I understood. To anyone else, it might look like clutter. Boxes stacked haphazardly, old furniture in corners, remnants of a life held onto. But I knew the truth. I walked slowly through the unit, past the outer layers first. Boxes of Carol's old clothes, shoes neatly paired, her beloved books, photo albums from before Sophia was born. Genuine memories preserved, wrapped carefully, a reflection of a life lived and lost. Authentic mourning. But deeper inside, beneath those layers, were the things that truly mattered. I moved aside a stack of boxes and revealed a locked metal cabinet. Inside were the documents shaping Sophia's future, documents that might now determine her survival. The prenuptial agreement signed 3 days before her wedding after a hospital conversation with Carol, who knew her time was limited. Carol had guided Sophia toward legal protections to shield her from men like Lucas. The trust documents, created 12 years earlier, long before Lucas existed, controlling the house, the investment portfolio, untouchable by any spouse. Sophia was the sole beneficiary. Life insurance, $1 million payable to the trust, not to Sophia directly, not to me. Even if something happened to me, it would be safe. The will, updated 6 months ago, ensured every asset went through the trust, every dollar protected. The deed to the house was in my name alone, the house Lucas had tried to acquire, the house he believed would secure their future. But it was key only in the way I had planned. Then there was the documentation. 3 years, 800 pages of journal entries, photographs of bruises, hospital records, emails, texts, a complete detailed record of abuse, escalation, and criminal behavior. I stood in the unit and understood the magnitude of what I was protecting. I wasn't just safeguarding Sophia from a manipulative man. I was protecting her from a future where she had nothing, where Lucas had isolated her completely, where he had convinced her to liquidate everything, house, trust, insurance, for his control, where I was gone and she was alone with him. That had always been his plan: remove me, control the money, remake her life in his image. Looking at the locked cabinet, I understood Lucas's desperation. 3 years of patient manipulation, now accelerating. He knew the longer he waited, the more likely Sophia would wake up, see the truth, and escape. That was why he tried to break into the storage unit, why he was asking about my schedule, making calls to an accomplice. His next move would be against me. He was betting that I wouldn't protect what I had built, that Sophia would be too vulnerable to hold on to the trust, the prenuptial agreement, and the insurance policies. He still thought he could win. I ran my hand over the cabinet. Inside were the proofs, the protections, the future I had secured for my daughter. Guided by Carol, who had foreseen men like Lucas, men who equate control with love, who would destroy anything to get what they wanted, Sophia had a way out. I left the unit that night with absolute clarity. The coming battle would be the most important of my life. Not for money, not for the house, but because everything Carol had entrusted me to protect was at stake. And Lucas believed he could take it all. Hours later, near midnight, Jacob called. His voice was low, urgent, strained in a way I had never heard. "Vincent, I need to see you now. Lucas has been following me, and I think I know what he's planning." I told him to come immediately. When Jacob arrived, he was shaking, not from fear, but controlled, barely held back anger. "I was at the park," he said, pacing, "trying to clear my head after everything we've been planning, and I noticed a car, same car behind me for 15 minutes. When I stopped, it stopped. When I walked, it crawled along beside me." "Lucas?" I said quietly. "Lucas," Jacob confirmed. I pretended not to notice. We went into a hardware store. Lucas followed. Jacob stopped pacing. He wasn't browsing. He knew what he was there for. "What did he buy?" I asked. "Things you don't buy together unless planning something violent. Rope, plastic sheeting, chemicals, supplies to hurt someone and stage it as an accident." He showed me footage from his smartwatch. Lucas stood in the aisle, calm, deliberate, selecting items with quiet certainty, unaware of being recorded. "Why risk being seen?" I asked. "Because he's desperate," Jacob said. "He knows about the storage unit. He knows evidence exists. He knows that once Sophia sees it, she'll leave him. He'll be finished." A cold certainty settled in my chest. He wasn't after the house anymore. "No," Jacob agreed. "He's after the life insurance, $2 million. Once you're gone, it goes to Sophia. Grieving and vulnerable, he could manipulate her decisions, claim it's for their future, and take the money." I sat heavily. The plan was simple and horrifying. Remove me, access the insurance, control Sophia, take the money, then disappear. It would have worked if Jacob hadn't been vigilant, if I hadn't documented everything. "We're out of time," I said, standing. "We must act." I called the police non-emergency line. Detective Robert Lambert took the call. I laid out the evidence. The video of purchases, 3 years of documentation, recorded conversations, a credible witness. "Can you come to the station?" Lambert asked. "I can," I said, "but this man is dangerous. His plan is imminent." "A patrol car would be stationed outside my house," I told Jacob. "You're staying here tonight. I don't want you alone." "What about Sophia?" he asked. "She's safe for now," I said. "Lucas thinks he still has time. He doesn't know we're moving." That night, Jacob and I assembled evidence. Journals, messages, photographs, video frames documenting every purchase. By 3 a.m., we had a complete package of abuse, threats, surveillance, and preparation for violence. I called Stephen Garrett's emergency line. "There's a credible threat against my life. I'm going to the police in the morning. If anything happens, you'll know who's responsible." "Vincent, what's happening?" he asked. "Lucas is planning to kill me," I said. "We have proof, and we're stopping him." Morning came. Jacob and I drove to the station. Detective Lambert reviewed everything for 4 hours. Journals, bruises, recordings, video, investigator reports. "We're bringing him in for questioning and applying for warrants to search his residence and vehicle," Lambert said grimly. As we left, I felt a shift. For 3 years, I had documented, observed, and waited. Lucas had revealed himself completely. Escalation past the point of return, his true face, and now the system would see it too. The next morning, Detective Albert Kingston, a man experienced and perceptive, spent 2 hours reviewing every detail. Finally, he said words that turned my blood cold. "Mr. Ashford, based on this evidence, your son-in-law fit the profile of someone planning something catastrophic." "What do I do?" I asked. "We'll maintain surveillance, monitor his movements and communications," Kingston said. "But you must protect yourself. Don't be alone. Don't accept food or drinks from him. Don't let him get close. Report anything unusual immediately." "I understand," I said. After Kingston left, I sat in silence. Time was no longer abstract. Danger was no longer theoretical. It was imminent, real, happening now. I called Sophia. She answered on the second ring. Dad, is everything okay? Sweetheart, you need to listen carefully, I said. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? Lucas? Lucas has done things under investigation, Sophia. I need you to trust me for the first time in 3 years. There was silence. What do you mean? Investigating? What are you talking about? She asked. I can't explain everything over the phone, I said. Come home now. Dad, Lucas said you would do this, she said, doubt in her voice. He said you're trying to turn me against him, trying to control me. I could hear him in the background, manipulating her even through the phone. Sophia, I know what he's told you, I said calmly. I know he's made you doubt me, but I'm asking you, as your father, to trust me this one time. Please come home. I don't know, Sophia whispered, fear in her voice. Fear of me, of Lucas, of making the wrong choice. But she listened. I kept my voice steady. The police had real evidence of Lucas's actions and his plans. I needed Sophia safe, here with me just for a few days. But Lucas says, she started. I know what Lucas says, I interrupted gently. I know everything, but I'm asking you to come home anyway, not because you have to believe me, but because you need to be safe. There was a long pause. Then quietly, Sophia said, Okay, Dad, I'll come home. When? I asked. Today, she replied. I'll tell Lucas I need to visit you. He won't like it, but I'll come today. I love you, Sophia, I said. I love you too, Dad, she replied. Her voice was small, uncertain, but it was there. After hanging up, I exhaled slowly. One piece was in place. Sophia was coming home. Once she could see the documentation for herself and understand what Lucas had done, she could finally make choices from safety rather than fear. But even as relief washed over me, I felt the weight of what was coming. Lucas would realize she had left. A man whose plan is falling apart is at his most dangerous. I called Jacob. Sophia is coming home today. I need you here. I'm on my way, he said. I called Stephen Garrett. Sophia is coming. I want her legally protected. Everything in place. I'm preparing the documentation now. When she arrives, we'll ensure she understands her options, Stephen said. For hours, I waited, checked security cameras, locked doors, and reviewed the documentation one more time, preparing for the conversation ahead. At 3 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. Sophia got out, and even from a distance, I could see her fear. Fear of me, fear of Lucas, fear of everything. But she was here. I walked to meet her. Seeing her face, I understood the impact of 3 years under Lucas's control. She was thinner, smaller, the light in her eyes nearly gone. Hi, Dad, she whispered. Hi, sweetheart, I said, pulling her into a hug. She was stiff at first, uncertain, then leaned into me. I felt a weight lift from my chest. Jacob arrived 15 minutes later, followed by Stephen Garrett. Surrounded by people who loved her, Sophia finally heard the full truth. I opened the leather journal, read pages aloud, and watched her realize none of this was her imagination. None was her fault. It was all documented, undeniable. By the time I finished, Sophia was crying. Not angry, not defensive, but the tears of someone finally understanding she had been trapped and that escape was possible. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered. It's not your fault, I said. The worst part isn't over yet, but you're safe now, and that's what matters. Before the confrontation, I asked her to consider, would she have done what I did? Then, the story continued with some creative elements for clarity and impact. If you prefer not to continue, you could stop here. The next evening, Lucas arrived at my house, angry in a way I had never seen. The mask had fallen completely. He pounded on the door, and when I opened it, he pushed past me. Where is she? Where's Sophia? He demanded. She's upstairs, I said calmly. You need to leave. She's my wife, he shouted. You're filling her head with lies. Give her back to me. Sophia is staying here, I said quietly, and you're leaving now. Lucas's face twisted with rage. You don't understand. You think you're protecting her, but you're destroying her and me. That won't end well for you. I didn't respond. I simply watched him realize that manipulation and intimidation no longer worked. Give me what's mine, he said, voice cold and calculating. The house, the money, Sophia. Give me what I earned. You haven't earned anything. You've taken enough, and it stops now. He lunged at me, hands for my throat. For a moment, I felt the full weight of his desperation and rage. But I wasn't alone. Jacob came through the back door exactly as planned. He grabbed Lucas, throwing him away with a force built from 3 years of observing his behavior. "Get your hands off him," Jacob said, deadly calm. Lucas spun on him, throwing wild punches. Jacob blocked and redirected, keeping both of us safe. Then the front door burst open. Detective Kingston and 2 uniformed officers entered with weapons drawn, having waited outside. "Lucas Torrance, you're under arrest," Kingston said. Lucas fought. He screamed that it was a setup, that I was the one who deserved arrest, that everyone was against him. But as officers handcuffed him and read his rights, the evidence spoke for itself. Materials for violence, photos of my house, schedules, insurance documents, nearly empty bank accounts, messages plotting to eliminate the problem. Every proof that Lucas had escalated from abuse to planning murder. From upstairs, Sophia watched. Hand on the railing, she saw the man she had tried to love reveal his true nature, and something shifted inside her. A breaking open, not destructive, but necessary, to see the truth before she could begin to heal. Jacob put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." Standing in my living room, watching Lucas led away, I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. The relief of a weight lifted after 3 years, that Sophia saw the truth, that Jacob had been there, that the system acted when it mattered, that we were alive. Later, after the police left and confirmed Lucas would be held without bail, I found Sophia in her childhood bedroom. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she looked smaller than ever. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, sitting beside her. She leaned against me and cried, tears of release, not sadness. Tears that recognized what had been done to her was not her fault, that the man she'd loved had tried to destroy her, and that her father had been right all along. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered. "No," I said, holding her tighter. "None of this was your fault. You were manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate you. That's his evil, not yours." We sat together for a long time. Jacob brought tea. Stephen confirmed all legal protections were in place. The private investigator sent a final report. The police updated us about charges filed. Slowly, Sophia began to understand the nightmare was over. But I knew the hardest part wasn't Lucas's arrest. It was helping Sophia understand what had happened to her, rebuild trust, a sense of safety, and her own sense of self. The next morning, I did something I had planned for 3 years. I took Sophia to the storage unit and opened it for her. The space was exactly as I left it. Boxes stacked carefully, furniture pushed to the sides, memories and protection arranged in a way only I understood. "What is all this?" she asked quietly. "This is your mother," I said simply. She stepped inside and broke, hand to mouth, tears streaming as she recognized Carol's belongings. "Mom's clothes," she whispered, holding a sweater that still carried her scent. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "I was saving them for you, for this moment," I said. She held the sweater to her chest, crying from a place where love and loss were intertwined. After exploring the outer layers, I revealed the locked cabinet, prenuptial agreement, trust documents, and finally, the leather journal. I read selective passages aloud, showing the pattern of Lucas's manipulation and abuse. June 15th, 2021, Lucas checked Sophia's phone without her noticing. She thanked him for caring. September 3rd, 2021, Lucas told Sophia Jacob wanted her, causing her to doubt her lifelong friend. February 12th, 2023, Lucas raised his voice. Sophia immediately apologized. March 20th, 2023, Lucas pushed her into a wall. She believed she deserved it. Sophia was shaking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you wait?" "Lucas had already convinced you I was the enemy. If I had confronted you with this, you would have clung to him tighter. I had to wait until you could see the truth yourself," I said. Her rage then poured out, not at me, but at Lucas, herself. The years lost, the lies, the person she'd been forced to become. I let her, because rage, when directed at the right target, can be healing. Finally, I gave her a letter in Carol's handwriting, sealed for the moment she would need her mother most. She read it repeatedly, sobbing not in anger, but in understanding and gratitude. Carol had prepared me to protect her even in death. That night, surrounded by 3 years of document protection, Sophia understood. Her father hadn't imprisoned her. Lucas's lies had. The man she'd tried to love had tried to destroy her. And true love sometimes looks like patience, waiting, documenting abuse. Not control, but a desperate attempt to save someone. The following weeks were the hardest. not for leaving Lucas, but for facing what she had endured and allowed. She moved back home, began therapy with Dr. Miranda specializing in abuse recovery, and slowly processed 3 years of her father's observations and protection. Some days she was angry at me, asking why I had waited. I explained Lucas had made her see me as the enemy. The legal proceedings continued, and gradually the path to healing began. Lucas was charged with attempted murder, domestic violence, financial abuse, and insurance fraud. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The video recordings, the journal, Jacob's testimony, surveillance reports, and financial records. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Sophia had to testify, recounting in court the ways Lucas had harmed her, the bruises, the lies, the isolation, the fear. When the verdict returned guilty on all counts, Sophia wept, not with joy, but relief. Relief. Relief that she had been believed, that what had happened to her was real, documented, and finally acknowledged. Lucas was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In the months that followed, Sophia and I began slowly rebuilding our relationship. There were quiet family dinners, conversations where she asked questions and I answered honestly, and moments when she hugged me without hesitation. Each gesture narrowed the distance of 3 lost years. Sophia attended therapy twice a week, working through her trauma. She learned to recognize manipulation, the difference between protection and control, and that love doesn't require losing yourself. Jacob remained a steady presence. He visited on Sunday afternoons, spoke about ordinary things, asked about her therapy without pressure, simply offering reliability and support. 2 months after Lucas's conviction, Sophia pulled me aside. "Dad, I've been reading your journal again, every page, and I realized something." "What's that?" I asked. "How much you loved me," she said, voice small. "I knew you loved me, but I didn't understand how. Every silence was patience. Every note, every record, every time you waited, it was all to give me a chance to understand on my own. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." "There's nothing to apologize for," I said, holding her. "You were manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate you. That's not your fault." Over the following months, Sophia's healing continued. Therapy continued. Jacob's support continued. Trust between us slowly rebuilt. Then one afternoon, Sophia asked something that changed everything. Sitting together in the kitchen, quiet in that way that precedes important questions, she said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "About Jacob," she said, a blush rising. "Would it be okay if I asked him out on a real date?" I felt a shift inside. I'd been waiting for this moment. I had seen the subtle signals for months, the way Jacob looked at her, the way she began to look back. "What do you want to know?" I asked gently. "Do you think it's okay?" she asked. "I think it's the best thing that could happen," I said. "Jacob has loved you for a long time. He waited until you were ready, until you could choose him freely, without fear, without manipulation. That's real love, Sophia. That's the love I hope you let him show you." That evening, Sophia called Jacob. I could hear her voice from the living room, nervous, hopeful, alive in a way I hadn't heard in years. An hour later, I watched them drive away together, and I understood the true meaning of my years of preparation. Every record, every journal entry, every moment of patience had been for this. The moment my daughter would be free, healed, and whole enough to choose love on her own terms. That was the real victory. Not the arrest, not the conviction, not the evidence, but seeing Sophia truly smile again, without fear. A year later, Sophia and Jacob visited. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen before. Quiet, real happiness, not the anxious, guarded happiness she'd worn with Lucas. "Dad," she said, sitting beside me, "Jacob and I wanted to talk to you. We're taking things slowly, but we're committed to building something together." I smiled. With Lucas, Sophia had been anxious, constantly monitoring moods. With Jacob, she was relaxed, laughing freely, making decisions without fear. Weeks later, she asked to revisit the storage unit. We went together on a Saturday morning. What had once been a fortress, a burden, was now simply a room of memories. We sorted Carol's belongings. Books, photo albums, jewelry, some to donate, some to keep. The locked cabinet remained. "Dad, what about your journal?" she asked. "It's yours if you want it, to remember how hard it was to get here." She held it carefully. Over the following months, I watched Sophia rebuild a life nothing like the one she'd lived with Lucas. She continued therapy, returned to work, reconnected with friends, and slowly explored a relationship with Jacob based on respect and genuine choice. One evening, she read my journal aloud. "You knew something was wrong from the start, didn't you?" she asked. "I had a feeling," I admitted, "but I couldn't prove it. So I documented, waited, and prepared." As the year progressed, I felt peace, not because the trauma disappeared, but because the purpose had been fulfilled. Sophia was safe, healing, building a healthy, loving relationship. Watching her and Jacob laugh together in the kitchen, I recalled Carol's words: "The greatest gift a parent gives isn't protection from pain, but the strength to survive it." 3 years of silence, documentation, and preparation had given Sophia that strength. People sometimes ask if I regret waiting, not telling Sophia sooner. I have made peace with it. She wasn't ready, proof was needed, and sometimes silence is the hardest protection. The storage unit was a quiet preparation for a storm I hoped would never come, but if it did, we were ready. My daughter is safe. She's building a real life. Carol would be proud, not for what happened, but for how we survived it. That storage unit taught me something unexpected. The greatest legacy isn't money or property, but knowing someone loved you enough to protect you, even when you couldn't see it, even when you thought they were the enemy. That's the real secret hidden there, not the insurance documents, but a father's patient love. To you listening, abuse comes in many forms, but patterns are always the same: control, manipulation, isolation, escalation. I made mistakes. I waited too long, stayed silent when I could have acted sooner. Don't do what I did. Don't wait for perfect proof. Don't let silence become an excuse. Speak up. Get help. Justice isn't revenge. Real protection is. If you're in an abusive situation and lack resources, reach out to a domestic violence hotline. They will listen, believe, and help you. This story isn't just entertainment. It's a warning and a guide. I was fortunate to have resources, but everyone deserves help. This is a story about patience, protection, and a father's desperate love. Abuse is real. Abusers are calculating. They don't stop on their own. If this story resonated, comment below, share your story, and subscribe for more accounts of survival and resilience. Thank you deeply for listening. Fair warning, the stories coming next may include fictional elements for educational purposes, exploring patterns of abuse, manipulation, and recovery. If this isn't right for you, step away. If it is, I'll be here. Take care of yourselves.